Fireside Tales. Hello, I'm Merlin Mililli. Welcome to my fireside, where I tell tales within tales. So far, every episode, we've started with the story of the Grateful Dead, which is a weird tale indeed. Start with that story because it's a story about reincarnation. And I tell lots of stories about reincarnation. It is my hope that, well, I don't really believe in hope. I would like to enlighten people with this show as to what reincarnation is, because people really don't seem to know. So I tell the story of the Grateful Dead because it's about reincarnation, also because I have a Grateful Dead thread to discuss after I tell the story. I've discussed it in other episodes, though, so you could always watch those first. So the story of the Grateful Dead, as I heard it from a deadhead. I'm a deadhead. By a fire. By a fire. Once there was a traveler, and she happened upon a town. And in the town, all the townspeople were crowded around a dead body. The dead man apparently had debts. So all the townspeople were squabbling over the dead man's body and arguing over his debts. So the traveler thought this scene unfolding before her in the town was just atrocious. This is the second time I've told it with a her. So the traveler pays the dead man's debts and pays for a proper burial for the dead man and prays over his grave. And then she travels on. And many decades later, she happens upon a life or death situation in which, out of nowhere, a stranger saves her life. So she's, thank you. You saved me. Who are you? Why'd you save my life? Thank you. And the stranger says, I am the Grateful Dead. Now, some people have said that the stranger that saves the traveler's life at the end of the story is a corpse. corpse. It's not a corpse. It's not a zombie. It's an old Buddhist story from the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and it's about reincarnation. It's about that person having only debts left to that traveler who paid his debts and for a proper burial and prayed over his grave. So when he reincarnated and found that person who had paid his debts and paid for a proper burial and prayed over his grave to be in mortal peril, he saved her life. To repay his debts to her. Because he was the Grateful Dead. Still creepy. But he was reincarnated. Like I believe I was reincarnated. And I believe I was reincarnated because, well, I'm a shaman. And I'm a druid high priestess. And in my shamanic and druid high priestess journeys, I learned a lot of meditating. And I did a lot of meditating. And I have access to this meditative library. It's a library where you can only access it through meditation. And so, in this library, it's called the Akasha, or the Akashic Records. Other people can go to this library because other people have books in the library. In this library, each soul has a book that tells the story of that soul and where it's been, when it's been, how it's been, why it's been. My soul happens to have a big, dusty old book. In the book, I found that my last life, my very last life before this one, I was in the Grateful Dead. Thus, my thread, my dead thread. I was born the day Ron Pigpen McKernan died. I was born in this body, a tiny baby girl, from my mother. Last thing I remember as Pigpen was blasting through space, or what I thought was space, but must have been the womb, and then I thought I was blasting as far as I could go, and I guess I was coming through the birth canal, and I was born. Things are not always what they seem. So, I've been discussing my lives. I went all the way back to the first page of my book, and we discussed ancient Peru, we discussed ancient Tibet, we discussed ancient Egypt, we discussed ancient Sumeria, and we discussed early AD, late 3rd century, early 4th century, no, late 4th century, early 5th century, late 300s, early 400s AD. In our last episode, Ninnian 1, we discussed a woman named Ninnian who I had been in another life. She was a druid high priestess, and she was the daughter of the Merlin of Britain. I know. That's a myth. But it's not a myth. Graham Phillips has written books to prove it not a myth. And he did a lot of research to prove it not a myth. It was covered up, and we've discussed other cover-ups throughout history for people that I was. I'm sure there were other people that were covered up. Dead men tell no tales, but dead women. We just blah, blah, blah. Anyway. So I left you at oaths. I was a high priestess, druid high priestess, in line to be the ruler of another land altogether. My mother and I were born in a different dimension than this one, where there is YouTube and Fireside Tales. My mother and I were born in this other dimension where Arthur, who was real too, was also born. I discussed in our last episode how he pulled the sword I forged out of the stone, only because he and I were the only ones who could pull that metal out of the stone, because the metal was forged in the other dimension, and so were we. So we were the only ones who could pull that out. So I was here to advise Arthur, because I had already been trained to be the ruler of this other land. So while I waited for the throne, sadly for my mother to die, I advised Arthur and taught the priestesses on Avalon. I discussed getting books in our last episode, and I discussed oaths. I last left you at oaths. I had to take oaths in order to advise Arthur. I also had to take oaths to the realm, the round table. So all of the knights I swore oaths to. But one in particular I swore my love to, and that was Galahad. He and I bonded. Well, there was war, like I said in our last episode. There had been war and famine and flooding, and for a long time Arthur managed to keep it at bay, the war. It was all around us, though, and it was pretty inevitable that it was going to come to Britain. There wasn't really a Camelot. They didn't really have castles yet. It was more of a fortress, and a lot of it was underground. And I used to take a boat there, and whenever I think of where Arthur lived, where I advised Arthur, we didn't call it Camelot, so I don't know. I think Graham Phillips found the castle, because every time he says the name of the one he thinks was Arthur's, it's not, it's only sort of a castle now. But whenever he says that, I smell vanilla. And when I would ride in on my boat, the place where I would ride in was like a cave underground. But it had some light coming into it, and it was like a beach in the cave, and there were vanilla orchids growing down there, because it was right below the kitchens. and you would come in the kitchens and then go up into your spaces. But I swore my love to Galahad over the battlefield, where he saved my life numerous times. Because I was a priestess, I was expected to be on the battlefield to heal wounds and people and drag them off. And it was so bloody and so horrifying and so scary. And I swore my love to the person who saved my life a couple times on the battlefield. So, right immediately after I swore my love to Galahad, it was late. I had to go back to the fortress and go back to my chambers and go to bed. And I remember telling him I loved him on this cliff by the waterside. It was beautiful and romantic. And then as soon as I got back to my room, Merlin was there telling me that I had to go back right away to where I was born because my mother died and I had to rule. And so it broke my heart, but I had to go. I wanted to help. I swore oaths, but I had swore more oaths, and Merlin made sure that none of them contradicted each other. And my oaths to my mother and my throne were bigger than those to Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And I had to go back. There was no one else to be the ruler. Basically, I had to just divvy up stuff fairly. It was mainly my job. But I did it for a long time. It didn't seem like it was that long. But it was too long. There's a door between dimensions that's only open every so often. So you can't just come and go whenever you feel like. The door has to be open. And so, and then there's penalties for straddling dimensions, period. But there's a time difference. There's a weird time difference I didn't realize or know about until I went from where I was ruler of the land. When I finally got a break, I had a daughter and she was being trained to be ruler of the land. So I found a spouse there and we had a baby and she was being trained. And so I was able to leave, and when the door was open, I left and went to check on things in this dimension. And when I got here, I looked in the water and saw an old wrinkled woman. And I hadn't been that old, only didn't seem that long in the other realm, but I aged faster there than I would have aged here, and Galahad was still rather young, and I was old. So I saw myself in the water, and then I went to kind of under cloak and dark of night, see if everybody else was old, and they weren't. So I just went back, having sworn my love to Galahad, though. Which brings me to another thread in the whole thing, and that's my husband. I believe he is the reincarnation of Galahad. So whenever any of you wonder why I put up with him, because he's Galahad reincarnated, and I promised him I would come back. So here I am. So I use rose quartz a lot. You want to, if you want to do any of this meditative work, you need to look at it as work, because it is work. And you should meet your spirit guides. You should ground. I've talked about grounding. I've showed you how in other episodes. I use rose quartz a lot. I actually use roses when I can for just a good positive vibe to whatever you're doing. Meditation, ritual, any kind of magic or spell or what have you. So I read tarot and I read runes, and like I said, I'm a medium, and one of the runes is an R rune, and it was for safe travels. Arr. When the pirates say "arr," they're referring, even though most of them don't know it, to the rune. So I'm a druid high priestess in this life, as well as having been one as Ninnian. And Ninnian, I guess she probably was murdered in the other dimension, because I don't think she came back here before she died. Or maybe that journey killed her. Or maybe somebody murdered her in the middle of the journey. Not really sure. Maybe I should look into that a little more and get back to you on it. But nonetheless, I have another tradition here. And that's that I sing Deja Vu differently every week. This week I'm doing it on the amped 12 string with a slide and a harmonic. So Arthur fell, even though he was king for at least a decade, and he had a peaceful nation, or whatever you want to call it, kingdom. And he ruled over other kings. He was sort of a king of kings. There's a theory out on the spiritual front that if you've been reincarnated, you've also been murdered. So if I didn't say that already, that's why I think Ninnian was murdered. Because she came back. But not after, or not before, excuse me, a penalty. She had to pay a penalty of about 100 years in another realm, which I will discuss next week for our Halloween episode. Ooh. Where we're gonna get spooky and weirder. If that's possible. Not sure we can get weirder. Oh, we could get weirder. Who am I kidding? So, I've had these threads that I've found in each of my lives. And there's the Scott thread. That's my husband. He's been my partner a couple of times, but our lives keep getting cut short. I'll talk about those lives in the future. But Merlin stays with me, and he's with me now, today. He's my male spirit guide. And I don't know what I would do without him. I certainly wouldn't be making Fireside Tales. I'll tell you that much. Probably wouldn't even be alive. He saved my life so many times. But only because he knows me and he knows what to say, and he was my father numerous times in past lives, which would mean we were both murdered if the theory on the spiritual front is right. So I also have a music thread throughout, and druids, they have the bards, and it's a big thing with druids music, and it always has been. All the druids are supposed to learn music, and one of the ways I taught in the school, the priestesses at Avalon, was through music. I played the harp. I should be playing the harp. I have a little auto harp. It's pretty cool. I just got it. I played it on the Egyptian episode. But I think I played music throughout every life. Some sort of music. So I'm going to play some music for you. But Arthur's death, because I was in the other dimension, there's that image. It chills me still to this day of the sword being caught by the lady in the lake. I was totally the lady in the lake. The priestesses knew they could speak to me through the water because I could see her. I had been the oracle. I could see her in the water, and I could talk to them. We could talk from the other dimension. It was like a phone call. It was pretty cool. I couldn't actually grab the sword, so that's why that's so cool to me and chilling. And you wouldn't ever want to grab a sword like that anyway. You want to grab it by the hilt. Nonetheless, especially that sword, it was powerful. They threw it in the lake, and I did get it because I went to the bottom of the lake and got it. I swam a lot. I was a great swimmer, and that's why I was called the Lady of the Lake. I was always in it. I love to swim even now, still to this day. It's one of my favorite things to do. Besides music, I really love swimming. So, loving music, being a druid and a storyteller and the teller of tales, I shall sing to you Deja Vu. Because maybe we haven't all been here before, but some of us have. Did it, 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 did it. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I had ever been here before, I would probably know just what to do. Don't you? If I had ever been here before and another time around the wheel, I would probably know just how to deal with all of you. And I feel like I've been here before. Feel like I've been here before, and you know, it makes me wonder what's going on under the ground. Do you know? Don't you wonder? What's going on down under you? La da da, la da da, la da da da, la da da da. maybe some of us have been here before. I certainly feel I have been here before. And it certainly would explain why some people just do not get reincarnation. They just don't understand it. No matter how many times you try to explain it to them, they just don't get it. Because they have not been here before. Maybe. I've not been able to disprove that theory. And it makes more sense of the deaths of each person I was. And the karmic retributions that have been flung upon me. I discussed karma. And you do pay for things, even if you don't know they're wrong. I didn't know straddling dimensions was wrong. I didn't know I would receive a penalty for it. There's no thou shalt not straddle dimensions in the 10 Commandments, though those are good rules and you should follow them. Also had some seriously crazy angelic experiences. I also make another show called The Love Show, in which I explore what is love. And on that show I did an angel episode where I asked, is love angels? And I did some angel writing for it, which is when you just kind of meditate and you just let, well, I prayed to an angel, Gabriel. I wanted to make a call to a specific one. And then I sat there with a pen. It was like my third try, and I finally got a pen to work. When it wasn't meant to be, and Gabriel didn't want to answer his phone, my pen wouldn't work. Like when I didn't, actually, I don't think I called Gabriel on the other lines, on the other pens. But after like the third try, I finally got it, and I made the angel episode right after that because I'd been trying to communicate with angels, and angels are love, and the message is love, and God is love, and God's message is love, and they are messengers, and the message is love, and it's all about love. Everything's about love. All you need is love. The Beatles had it right. All you need is love, and The Love Show, and Fireside Tales, which are all on Mililli Studios channel on YouTube. So subscribe. I desperately need more subscribers. Please help. Please subscribe. And definitely catch next week's episode because it's a special episode next week for Halloween. Ooh, we're gonna get even weirder and spookier and So, thanks for watching. Catch us next week when we get spooky and weird and tell tales.